2016 meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals for the City of Troy to order. And at this point in time, I would like to call on Mr. Evans to call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Desmond?
Here.
Mr. Eisenbacher?
Here.
Mr. Neal?
Here.
Mr. Lambert?
Here.
Mr. Sanzika?
Here.
Mr. Clark?
Here. So we do have quorum, and we do have one member that has resigned from the board, and we do have, in addition to that, two alternates the City Council has approved to sit on the board if a member is not here. Apparently both of our alternates were not available for tonight, so we do not have a full board. So we'll talk about that in a little bit, but if you do have business before this committee tonight, you do have the right to request that your action item be postponed to a future date, and the board will consider that. Moving forward, before we move into item number 2, I'd just like to introduce my fellow board members, my colleagues, and the city staff that are here tonight to help us conduct our business. So to my far left is Mr. Lambert, and then Vice Chairman Eisenbacher. This is Mr. Sanzika. I'm Glenn Clark, the chairman of the board. To my right is Mr. Desmond. This is Mr. Neal. And then over to the side is Mr. Evans, who is the city administration's liaison to this board. And then to the far side here is Ms. Dufresne, who is assistant city attorney for the city of Troy. And for the purpose of our board here tonight, she serves as our legal advisor. I've already addressed the fact that we do have one member that is not here. And at this point in time, I'm going to call on our Vice Chairman Eisenbacher to read our rules and procedures before we take any other action. Vice Chairman Eisenbacher.
Thank you. Zoning Board of Appeals is a group of 7 of your neighbors appointed by Troy City Council to decide on requests for variances and other matters that are brought before them. A variance is a relaxation of the literal provisions of the zoning ordinance. Petitioners must indicate a hardship or practical difficulty with the land that would warrant the granting of the variance. Procedure. The board will hear the items in the order that they appear on the agenda. When an item is called, the chairman will verify that the petitioner is present. Then the city administration will summarize the facts of the case. The petitioner will then be given an opportunity to address the board to explain the justification for the actions requested. After the petitioner makes their presentation and answers any questions that the board may have, the chairman will open the public hearing. Any person wishing to speak on the request should raise their hand and, when recognized by the chairman, come up to the podium and sign in on the sheet provided. The speaker should identify themselves with name and address, indicate their relationship to the property in question, for example, next door neighbor, live behind the property, etc., and state whether they are in favor of or against the variance request and give reasons for their opinion. Comments must be directed through the chairman. Comments should be kept as brief as possible and closely pertain to the matter under consideration. Only one person will be recognized by the chairman to speak at a time. At the conclusion of public comments, the chairman will close the public hearing. Once the public hearing is closed, no other public comment will be taken unless in response to a specific question by a member of the board. The board will then make a motion to approve, deny, or postpone the request. In order for the request to pass, a minimum of 4 votes are needed. If the request is not granted, the applicant has the right to appeal the board's decision to Oakland County Circuit Court.
Thank you, Mr. Eisenbacher. So before we move on to any other further business, Mr. Desmond recommended that I just announce that item number 4A has been requested to be moved to the June agenda, and we're going to get to the reasons in a second. But if you are pressed for time and you'd like to come back in the future to hear that case, you're more than welcome at this point to consider leaving, since we're not going to be considering it tonight most likely, but we'll get to that formally in just a second. We do move on to the approval of the minutes related to the April 19th meeting. Is there any discussion by a member, a comment, or a motion to be heard? Mr. Sanzika.
So move.
And your motion is?
Support the approval of the minutes.
Very good, thank you. Is there a second to that? Mr. Desmond seconds that motion. Is there any discussion on that motion by members? Seeing none, Mr. Evans, I believe we're prepared to vote.
Mr. Eisenbacher?
Yes.
Mr. Neal?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Mr. Sanzika?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Desmond?
Yes.
Motion passes. We're on to item number 3, which is the approval of the agenda. Are there any questions or concerns by a member of the board related to the agenda? Seeing none, the agenda that's printed and was distributed is our set agenda for tonight's business. Moving on to item 4A, related to the variance request of Mr. Pardoon, also related to 1321 Boyd. I will let Mr. Evans address the reason why Mr. Pardoon requested this to be moved to the June agenda.
Yeah, Mr. Pardoon requested on May 4th, because he's going to be out of town on a personal issue this week, that he requested this matter be postponed to the regularly scheduled June 21st zoning board meeting.
Thank you, and I understand, speaking to Mr. Evans, that the neighbors in the property in question were obviously notified in compliance with the ordinance, and thus, obviously, we may have many people here tonight related to this item, but if something is last minute request for it to be moved or postponed, that same communication is not done to the residents. So I just wanted everyone to be aware that's perhaps why you're here tonight. Are there any questions or comments by a member of the board related to 4A? Mr. Lambert.
This is a question, Mr. Chairman, for Ms. Dufresne. Number one, do we still have to hold a public hearing tonight since it's on the agenda? And the second part is, because the motion at the previous meeting was to postpone it to tonight's meeting, would it be in order then for a motion to postpone it to the June meeting?
Ms. Dufresne.
Yeah, Mr. Lambert, that's a very good question. I think because the notices went out, we should open the public hearing, see if there's anyone who wants to speak, knowing that you will just hear comments, and there'll be no deliberation, and you will not ask questions. You will simply be hearing their comments. That's especially for people who may not be able to come back on June 21st. As I discussed with Mr. Evans just now, this is being recorded, so Mr. Pardoon would have the opportunity to view the video if he wanted to make any comments about the comments that were brought up tonight. So, did I answer the question?
The second part was about another motion to postpone again, but since we moved to postpone it to this meeting.
Yeah, that would be appropriate, yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. So at this point in time, I think we'd need to have a motion to be considered about postponing, and then we could go into the public hearing. Is that correct, Ms. Dufresne?
That would be fine to do.
Okay. And then just for the general public watching at home or here tonight, in collaboration with Mr. Evans before the meeting, item number 7 is public comment as well. So you, in a moment, are going to perhaps, if you're here to speak on this issue, you could speak during public comment on this agenda item, or wait through the entire agenda, because we're having such an exciting and fun time tonight, to speak on item number 7, which is general public comment, which you can direct to this board your comments on that item. It would be completely decision on your part if you are here present tonight. Mr. Evans.
And if I could, Mr. Chair, add that we will also have an opportunity, if this is, presuming this will be postponed to the June 21st, we will have a public hearing at that meeting as well.
Right.
So people can comment now, they can comment then, they can comment at both.
Right. So perhaps you have the opportunity to speak tonight and then. That's completely up to you as well. So at this point in time, I just turn to the board and ask if there is a motion by a member to consider postponing this to the June agenda. Mr. Sanzica.
I so move to postpone this agenda item to the June 21st meeting.
Thank you.
Second.
Mr. Eisenbacher seconded that. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, Mr. Evans, we're prepared to vote.
Mr. Neal?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Mr. Sanzica?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Desmond?
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbacher?
Yes.
Motion is passed, and so that will be appearing before us yet again in June. And at this point in time, I'd like to open the public hearing for those who'd like to address the board on this matter. If you'd like to speak to the board and have your comments heard, please come to the podium here, and please identify yourself. Seeing that there isn't anyone who'd like to speak on that agenda item, we are going to close the public hearing and move on to item 4B, which is a variance request related to Safet Staffa, hopefully that's pronounced correctly, of Stroing Construction related to 6511 Malvern. Mr. Evans, could you address the board on this matter?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As printed in the agenda, this is a variance request for Safet Staffa of Sterling Construction Incorporated for property at 6511 Malvern in order to construct a new home, a 2-foot variance to the 30-foot maximum height limit. I'd like to direct everyone's attention to the monitors. The subject property is located east of Adams Road and north of West Square Lake. In the monitors, it's circled there and outlined in red. This is a close-up of the neighborhood. The subject property, 6511 Malvern, is outlined in red, and it's on the west side of Malvern, south of Limerick. The surrounding properties are zoned and used for single-family residential. The applicants provided elevations of the proposed house. This is the front and rear elevation. And what I've done is blown up the front elevation. What I'd like to do is illustrate and explain how the city ordinance requires or tells us how to calculate the height of a house. What it says is that the height of a house is calculated at the midpoint between the peak and the eaves. So what I've done is I've drawn in this red line. There was actually a darker line there. I just drew it in for accenting purposes. City code says that the maximum height of buildings in this district can be 30 feet. He's proposing a 32-foot tall home as represented by this line here. So in order to build this home, he needs relief of a 2-foot variance from this board. I'll turn it back over to the board for any questions.
Are there any questions or comments for city staff? Vice Chairman Eisenbacher?
Just so I'm totally clear, you're measuring the midpoint between the very top peak of the house and the lowest gutter section or the bottom of the roof line?
It would be this particular portion here, so the highest section of the roof. So we're measuring from this point here to that line there. And so the midpoint between those two, that's where we get the 32 feet.
Okay.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes. Mr. Evans, a similar issue came up a few years ago with a home, although the variance was more than 2 foot at the time. And at that time, the fire department expressed some concerns about whether they could deal with a home like that because of trying to get the ladders up to that height. And I sent you an email over the weekend asking you if the fire department had any concerns about it. Could you give us an answer to what they've told you or what they haven't told you?
Right, and it's more the latter. They are aware, and they've indicated they would review the complete construction plans, presuming they're in the building department, and they would be happy to comment.
Okay. Would there be, if we were to approve the variance, the fire codes would still apply to the house itself, though, regardless of what action we take tonight?
Yes, the building code does cover that. We're under the
Thank you.
international building codes.
Thanks.
Any other members with a question or comment? Well, hearing none, if we could ask the petitioner to, I'm sorry, Vice Chairman Eisenbacher.
Okay, I just realized another item. The 32-foot height, you're measuring it from the ground location for the average face of the house, not the slope?
Well, in theory, this line would continue down this way. So you could measure it from any portion of the front elevation, but this is the tallest part.
Okay.
As measured that way. So even if we were to follow see how
So
we
it
have
follows the curvature?
Yeah, follows the grade, right.
Okay.
So that's a good point. So am I understanding then, so the right facade there that dips down because apparently the property goes down here factors into the overall height?
Right.
So, and that would not be considered below ground because it faces the front of the house?
Right, we use the front elevation, we use the grade at the base of the house.
see. Okay.
Yeah, and draw a parallel line just across.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
Just
by
for
member?
my
Mr. Dessler.
clarity, so you're saying that that is, the topography affects that?
Right.
Okay, all right.
Exactly.
So at this point in time, I'd like to call the petitioner forward. or if you're representing the petitioner, you can come to the podium. Please identify yourself and state the relationship to the property that you have.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Safet Stafa. I am the builder for that property.
Okay.
Maybe if you allowed me, I have a rendering. It shows, it seems to me a little bit bigger than 2 feet. It's less than what it looks there, you know. And it's just maybe 2% of the roof. You know, the rest of the house is way below the requirement. And, you know, somebody, you know, on the building department, you know, catch that, you know, it was way more, it was 4 feet. And we dropped the whole house, you know, but if we go more, we damage the look of the house. So Mr. McNeil is the owner of the house. We spent a lot of time to design that house. And if you're allowed, I can show.
If you could start with Mr. Lambert, and he'll pass it to his fellow board members.
Thank you.
Oh, you have a copy for each person? Okay, excellent. Thank you. Please wait till you're back to the microphone.
We
Okay,
contacted the neighbors. We showed the blueprints. We show, you know, how the house is going to look, where the problem is. And we have some, for the neighbor both next door neighbors and in front, we have a signed paper, letter, which we have it here, you know. But I have just, I don't have it.
why don't you just
We'll just pass it down.
give him to Mr. Lambert, he'll pass him. Thank you.
I don't know what to tell. It's a big lot. It's the best part of Troy. It's really the best part of Troy. I have many years building on Troy, and I believe city officials, they know what kind of house I built. And this part is maybe the exclusive part of Troy. It's Bloomfield Hills Schools. The lots are over 1 acre. This particular home is on a hill. Does not give shade to anybody, not the neighbors, no shade, nothing, doesn't interrupt anything. It's more for the look of the house, you know, for the price of the house. You know, it's the biggest area that pay the biggest tax for the city of Troy. It's a high tax place. You know, I don't know what else to say. So I hope, you know, just you don't break my customers' heart, you know, because they put too much love on building this house without knowing that we're 2 foot high on that thing. And if we go back to change the whole thing, there will be, you know, everything will change. The roof pitch will change. You know, it's not going to be the same house. It's going to look completely different house.
Okay, let's see if we have any questions from the board related to your variance application. Mr. Sanzica.
I'm just curious, I'm not an architect, and I can't profess to understand all the slopes and pitches of roofs, but have you spoken to your architect about, you know, being able to provide the requirement that's required by our ordinance?
Yes, we did.
And is it possible to change the pitch of the roof or to maintain the 32 feet?
We changed already. It was 4 foot. We changed that. So we changed that. But if we go further, the whole roof trusses will be completely different. The inside of the house will be lower. If John can, you know, maybe I have I cannot explain very good. You go ahead, and if I can introduce, you know.
Please speak into the microphone, your name.
Sure. John McNeil. I'm actually the homeowner of 6511 Malvern.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I just kind of wanted to kind of reiterate what Sam was referring to, but the pitch, you know, majority of the roof is under the 30-foot requirements of Troy. It's that one little area that we're looking for. That's the 2-foot variance just on the middle peak there, and that's really the issue. But you know, it's when I designed the house with the architect, it was in the notion of building a kind of French European country manor house, and the pitches are in such that it creates that type of architecture for that style house. And so the architect built it that way, and knowing that most of it was under the 30 feet. And then what happens if you change that 2 foot, just even on that crown of that top of the house, the ceilings inside the house, both on the first and second floor, have to come down as well. So like a 9 foot would have to go to 8 foot, a 10 foot would have to go to 9 foot. So it really alters the plans quite substantially and causes quite a bit of, cost to talk to the architect to redevelop the plans.
Okay. Any other members from the board? Comments? Mr. Lambert?
Just a quick question. I drove by the property the other day and noticed that it is a rather challenging piece of property, number one, because of the way the land is light out there, and secondly, the slope of the property looks like it's also quite a challenge. Do you know what kind of a difference in height there is from the highest point of the property down to the lowest?
Not exactly, I'm sorry.
No, there's definitely a pitch that goes down on the, you can see on the, that would be the north side of the house, and that's where we're going to have a walkout basement on the end cap of that north side, and then the rest is all, the elevation's flatter in the back, and there's just that little dip that is on the east side of the house, and then the rest is level.
All right, thank you.
I don't know if that, I hope that answers your question. Okay.
Mr. Evans, I have a question, but maybe the petitioner can address this as well. So when I'm looking at this photo, if the grade of the parcel had been changed to match the majority of the house, the main portion in this left area, let's just say that they infilled this area over here with lots and lots of dirt, which would then change your calculations for everything here. Isn't that correct?
Well, no, what we do is we actually focus on the tallest peak, or the tallest portion, because we've got varying roof heights in various sections. So we look at the tallest one.
But that's here, but isn't that to the bottom here? Or is, that's what I'm saying is,
If we look at the left side
Yeah.
of the overhead, here's the measurement. It goes from this line here up.
I see.
This is the grade that we use. Now, if we were to continue this line along here at the bottom and measure perpendicular to the grade, it's not 30 feet up. I think he designed it this way on purpose because of the slope. So,
From the brick ledge.
I'm sorry?
From the brick ledge to the top of the roof, we are 2 foot higher. And we have the minimum brick ledge. We had 4 foot brick ledge. We shrink the house, the whole house. It's on the ground now, and we changed the roof pitch. So, just
So what he's saying is, I think you guys probably already figured this out. Originally, it was 4 feet over the variance, and what Sam talked to some folks, part of the city of Troy, and I think they came up with the idea to drop the house 2 feet, which gives us still 2 feet above the variance, and this is why we're here tonight, trying to take care of this other 2 feet to get a variance request.
Any other comments or questions from the board? Seeing none, if you gentlemen could have us, Mr. Sanzica.
I'm just curious, the rendering you have shows the far right roof to be higher than the middle right portion, but the plans don't appear it to be that way. And I don't know if I'm just reading it incorrectly.
Yeah, the rendering's a third-party provider that does it just for basically, for us, it's actually not the best rendering in the world, to tell you the truth, but the plans are more accurate. The rendering isn't exact to what the plans are.
stand on the parties.
But it's just, we wanted to show you where that peak was above in color as opposed to black and white.
I guess my point is that the peak, if it's in accordance with the plan, would it carry all the way across where it's highlighted on the drawing?
No, just that one crown is that one part, right above the door. The highest peak is the 2 foot above the zoning allowable height.
Thank you.
Right dead center in the house.
Yeah.
right.
The lines maybe should be 2 or 3 inch. We don't know exactly, maybe 2 to 3 inch, the other peak. If you go left, right there.
Yeah.
That is tiny, tiny bit. The 2 foot is that small part. That's what it is.
On the plans, I do see the detail better than that drawing.
Yeah.
If you go to another sheet.
That section to the left is within the allowable height. the longer section.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very much. So
Thank you.
Thank you. So now at this point in time, we're going to call the public forward. If you'd like to address the board on this matter, the public hearing is open. And come to the podium here and identify yourself. Is there anyone who'd like to address the board on this matter? Seeing no, that there isn't any person who's coming forward, we've closed the public hearing on that agenda item. So we bring this back to the board for comment, questions of staff, questions of the petitioner, or a motion. Mr. Neal.
I have a question for staff. Paul, just so, I guess I'm confused, is the drawing that's on sheet 54 of the agenda, where we see an elevation view of the house, that shaded hash-marked area where it says continuous ridge vent, then there's another segment, continuous ridge vent, is that all 2 feet? Is that correct? Is that drawing correct, or now it seems to me some question of whether that drawing is accurate as to what exceeds 30 feet? It's the whole area, right?
No, the architect has indicated that it's this area here, and he's indicated on the plan that it's up to 24 inches tall, the hashed area, and that's the area that they need a variance from. So in other words, if they were to saw that off, that would actually bring the average the midpoint down lower to 30 feet. That's what they're trying to illustrate.
Okay, so it's the peak all the way across the top of the house, right up there.
Right here,
It's
yeah,
not-
the hatched area, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's 2 segments of roof,
Right, I think this one's
a little taller.
a little taller and a little
The
more
other one
forward.
also exceeds.
Right, yeah.
Okay, I just want, because it sounded like in the recent discussion that the lower of the 2 met criteria.
The rest of the peaks do, but these 2 do not meet criteria.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, any other members of the board like to be heard? Mr. Lambert?
No one else is going to, Mr. Neal may have a
Oh,
question.
I'm sorry, Mr. Neal.
Well, I just had a comment, but I could go after.
Please.
I may be missing it, but I see the architectural desire and need for the design, and I can see the rework for the design trusses, but I see a want, but I don't see a hardship. Unless I'm missing it, so I'd like to put that out there for the board to enlighten me. And that's my only comment.
Thank you. I did mention, just for the petitioners, or any petitioner here on any other agenda item, including this one here tonight, once again, you have the right, since we're not a full board tonight, to request for this to be postponed to a future meeting of this board. Doesn't mean that the board will agree with you to postpone it, because since it is on our agenda, we can take action on it. But the tradition has been, generally speaking, that if there's not a full 7 members here, we have moved it if there's a request to do so. So just, once again, I want to just mention that. You have the right to come to the podium and request that for the item B or item C. Mr.
I have
Sanzico?
a question for Mr. Evans. Is there a basis for the 32 feet requirement other than, is there like a building code or a state fire code or any requirement that you may be aware of that would mandate this 32 feet?
It's out of the zoning ordinance, so the 30-foot height limit is from the zoning ordinance, has nothing to do with the building code or the fire code or any other code.
I'm trying to understand the rationale for that 30 feet.
I can tell you that that has been around for decades, so I don't know the rationale.
You're not helping me, Mr. Evans.
It predates his service at the city of Troy. Just to my fellow board members, I thought when we first were looking at this, that the irregular shape of the parcel, as far as Mr. Desmond said, the topography factored in, but apparently it doesn't here. So that's one area, obviously, to Mr. Neal's point, that we could have considered if it did, but that's obviously not the case here. So I understand Mr. Neal's concern. Mr. Desmond, did you have something?
No. I mean, it's the same issue I see as the, you know, does the grading of the land, does the irregularity of the lot affect, you know, this requirement? And as far as I'm understanding now, it does not, correct?
Right.
Mr. Sanzica?
So if I understand the hardship or the difficulty for the petitioner is that rather than having a 9-foot ceiling, he would have to have an 8-foot ceiling in his home, and that would be his hardship or his want. That's really the difference in granting if we didn't grant the variance.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Neal?
I guess the applicant would have to clarify this, but it was my understanding you probably preserve the ceiling height, but you'd have to re-engineer the trusses, which would be costly either from a manufacturing point of view or architectural design costs, but that's an economic issue which we can't consider. That's where it comes to my concern. My concern, my personal just thought is, hey, I'd give them the variance, but I have to apply the rules, and I'm trying to find a rationale that gets me there that's defendable, and I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to make that argument on that side of the podium than this side of this table. So I just think that obviously this is a beautiful creation. Whoever, created this from A to Z just did a phenomenal job. And the brick and stonework is just incredible. And that portion of Troy is very beautiful, there's no question. But as Mr. Sanzica said, we're being told that, well, we don't want an 8-foot ceiling, we want a 9-foot ceiling. Well, what happens when the next petitioner walks in the door and wants a 10-foot ceiling? And then a week or a month later, it's a 15-foot ceiling. Well, if you have the money, it sounds pretty good, but at the end of the day, the ordinance is the ordinance, and there's reason why council many years ago, before we were on this board, passed it. And if it needs to be updated, there's a formal way to do that. Petitioning city council for that purpose. And that's the proper way, instead of coming and requesting essentially a building law to be, in this case, broken. So that's my concern. So if somebody could address any hardship, Vice Chairman Eisenbacher.
Well, first, I just want to list these 4 letters from the neighbors. It is the two adjacent neighbors, so the 2 that are touching the left and the right property lines, and then across the street, and then one that should be across the street but doesn't match up with the lot numbers on our overhead. So one of them didn't match the map. I'll pass them around so everyone can continue to see them. And I do have a question for the petitioner. The question would be is why, I understand the difficulty, because if you look at the plan, and this is one thing we didn't talk about, but throughout the plan, when you look at it, there's little triangles showing that the pitch is a 14-foot rise for every 12-foot run. And that is consistent throughout the property, and that's an architectural feature. So by changing the pitch on that high peak, it affects the whole of the property because they all have that same pitch. But instead of looking at it from the top, he already mentioned that they already moved it up 2 feet on the bottom. I'm curious what the hardship is, why they couldn't move it up 2 more feet from the bottom in that area of the house so that they're measuring down to a higher point. If we could call the petitioner
Ask
back.
the petitioner to come back to the podium, please.
That's a very good question. We moved the roof pitch too. The roof pitch was higher than it shows on this paper, So we moved the roof pitch and we dropped the house. And the building height does not touch building codes or fire codes or nothing of this kind. But as I told in the beginning, this is it's not a house that is built there 50 years ago. These houses are way over $1 million. So if you go and change the roof pitch one more time, and you gain that 2 foot, that part there, but it's not going to look the same. So instead of looking at a Ferrari, it's going to look a Dodge or a Tata car. That's what it is. So it's just the beauty of the house. So we don't do shade to anybody. We don't, nothing, not any damage. It's just make the neighborhood way better, more value, more beautiful. That's what it is, not a hardship, And from putting a $1.5 million home, and to tell the customer, you cannot have this, you're going to go 8 foot. 8 foot is maybe built in 1908, 1907. I remodeled a house built in 1907, and that has an 8 foot high ceiling. So we're in 2015. I don't think, even if, somebody will come next door and, I'm building there 4 more houses, and nobody can come and tell I need 10 foot or 15 foot. I have 30 years building homes. I didn't see this, that's what it, it will be, you go and change it. But we changed the roof pitch. Was a different roof pitch at the beginning. We changed that too.
Unfortunately, our list of reasons that we're allowed to give a variance doesn't include financial considerations. So we've got our list of criteria that we're allowed to work off of. And like one of my colleagues on the board said, it seems like the ordinance needs to be updated to allow for a more modern construction.
That would be
not
the
a
best thing.
variance. The problem is you have a time crunch. You want to get building for the summer, and going through a zoning ordinance revision is usually not quick.
I'm sorry, another thing, I have another property there, which is way more than 1 acre, and I can put 4 houses there, and I go to the planning department and say, hey, I can put 4 houses here. And they tell me, no, not in this area. I say, why? Because in this area, it can be just 1 house, a big house, and, that means it's both ways. I say, okay, if you don't let me split this property, why don't, just, we're human at the end of the day, so. Thank you.
Do you know if surrounding communities allow houses that are higher than 30 feet?
I can mention Shelby, Birmingham. I had a house in Sterling Heights, not me. Every time, heaven. Bloomfield Hills for sure, many, many, many times. So it's not, maybe in Troy, but that part of Troy, it's very, very, I told at the beginning, it's the best part of Troy, so.
Thank you.
So if you, to keep it low, because we don't bother anybody, so.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Lambert?
while the petitioner's up here, do you want to give them another offer if they want to postpone this since we don't have a full board tonight?
That is his option to state that if the gentleman would like. I'd just like to remind you that I'm a Chrysler kid, so I don't think you've seen the current lineup of the Dodge cars and how beautiful they are. So we have to be a little careful about that around these parts.
I'm sorry. But
My grandfather retired there, my dad retired there.
maybe the compare is not right, but that's the way I feel it. I built a house in Long Lake, but the next door house, it's built 60 years ago, and I built a big mansion there. So it's beautiful, it's good, so.
Sure,
Yeah, he's also forgetting that Vipers are a lot faster than a lot of Ferraris.
that's right. Amazing car. So would you like to address anything else to the board regarding the okay. If not, you can have a seat. Thank you very much. So it's back to the board table for any consideration. Mr. Evans?
Just to refresh my memory and measure twice, cut once, because I'm looking at a number of things while everybody's talking. Did we do public comment for this item? Very good.
Yes, we need to have public comment, and,
No, we did do.
Yes, no one
No
wanted
one
to
spoke.
I'm sorry, you're right.
Okay.
That's,
And we did receive one comment via, that was on the DACE,
and
and I thought maybe,
Mr. Eisenbacher, I was about to get to that, but
oh, okay.
also we have the ones that they handed out.
Yeah, I know we talked about that. I just
Yeah.
want to make sure he mentioned the other
Yes.
public
Okay.
comment, just to get in the record.
Okay, so there's 5 in favor, or 5 without any objections.
So
From
4 that
adjacent
were
owners.
handed in and 1 sent in electronically. In favor, all in favor. Okay, thank you, Mr. Evans. So any board member,
I have a question. Now, noting the slope on this property, if there was an adjustment made to the placement of the house on the lot, would that have an effect?
The adjustment would need to be, and I'll refer to the overhead, either the height and the construction or the grade in the area where it exceeds 30 feet. So if somehow this elevation were brought up, and this is just in theory, because I'm not an architect, to make the average height, that potentially could be done, because that's going to affect the highest peak now and the height of the highest peaks. In theory, I guess if you were to bring the grade up to this point here, these might not even be the highest peaks. Maybe it would be this one, and then it would be under 30 feet. It's speculative.
But that's
in the
not
model,
what's
but-
presented, so.
Right, this is where we have to measure from the grade along the front of the house to whatever's the highest peak or the highest portion.
The only justifiable thing that I can see to get this granted would be as a result of the characteristics of the lot, and it's not variable that way, that I can tell. As much as I want to find a reason to do it, but it's not there, so.
I guess
Mr. Sansica.
one more question. Where would you think the first floor elevation would be in the house? Would you, typically it would be at the front door grade, I would think, the, lower edge of the front door. And the space below the front door would be I'm sure the space below the basement, I would think. So I guess it may not be practical, but I guess if you could raise that up, it appears to be more than 2 or 3 feet of steps up to the front door. That may not look very good, but I mean, that would be the only other option that I could imagine.
is that to the petitioner or just kind of in general?
In general,
Okay.
Obviously, you're not interested in doing that, but
Right.
but that would be the only other option I think would be available.
So related to item 4B, is there any member that would like to make a motion of any sort?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Neal?
at this point, I'd like to make a motion to deny the request based on the conclusion that a hardship has not been identified that would allow us to act.
Motion has been made. Is there a second? Is there a second to that motion? I'll second it for discussion purposes. So now we're at discussion. Is there, Mr. Vice Chairman Eisenbacher?
Looking at the criteria that's on our page 2 of our agenda, A through E, the 5 items we have to consider. Item A is the hard one. Exceptional characteristics of property for which the variance is sought shall make compliance with the dimensional requirements substantially more difficult than would be the case for the great majority of properties in the same zoning district. Characteristics of property which shall be considered include exceptional narrowness, shallowness, smallness, irregular shape, topography, vegetation, and other similar characteristics. Topography seems to be a characteristic. Problem is they choose what the house is relative to topography.
So regardless of, I mean, that's the house dimension, so regardless of where it's moved onto where it's, I mean, that's the height. It's always going to be the height from the ground floor.
Unless we say because of.
So it's not the
fact of
land, it's the
hill.
design.
But even if we had brought up let's say the right side of the house as the image shows, we don't gain anything it's not an average topographic elevation that we're basing it off. We're already, it looks like, if I'm understanding the drawing right, we're already using the most advantageous elevation already, unless we add to it. My problem too is I can't figure out how to justify a waiver, you know? Other than an economic need, and I can't use that. So in order to move this along, or at least get this from being stalled, that's why I made the motion. But I don't have a way to get around item A.
Mr. Lambert?
Just the only comment I had was that I believe, and I don't know if all of you had a chance to go out and take a look at the property, but I believe the topography is such that a 2-foot variance is an acceptable variance when you look at the unusual characteristics of the property. That's why I didn't second the motion. It's a difficult situation because it is we haven't been given a rationale, but I believe the rationale does exist for it. That's why I didn't second Mr. Neal's motion to deny the variance.
I agree with that. I just wouldn't know how to frame it in a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Neal?
question for staff.
Yes.
Question I have is more of a legal one. We'll be getting into this gray area where we got to use our judgment.
We love these, don't we?
And you get beyond what the rules say, and a black and white issue, or looking at just the description of the regulations, the code says no. But what Mr. Lambert's speaking to, I agree with. What I'm looking for is some form of guidance where that wiggle room is that we can get to, that we could also use in the future to hang our hat on and say why we did this here, but why we may have to make the opposite decision for somebody else.
Right, and as I say, we always have to look to the zoning ordinance for our guidance. But let me remind this board, you know, you're charged with finding a hardship, but if you also look at the statement of practical difficulty, you're supposed to find as many of the 5 standards as possible. So if you can justify, if you can find justification based on what Mr. Lambert is saying, I think what I worry about as the attorney is setting precedent for the next person who comes in and wants something similar. But I think if we can make a record based on what Mr. Lambert is saying, that's not a problem. And I also would, you know, we have Mr. Boyd's matter, we are stuck in a similar situation. But the difference here is we don't have anybody opposing. So I think that can factor into this board's decision as well. We don't have anyone saying that they think this is something they don't want.
So to follow up on that, if I understand what you're saying correctly, if one of us could put forth a motion or an argument that would meet items, for example, B, C, D, and E, but not A, we would be justified to go in the direction of approving something like this.
I don't want to say that you don't have to find a hardship, but I think based on what I think the discussion is almost there with respect to touching enough on a hardship to satisfy the legal requirements and the zoning ordinance.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Neal?
I'm not sure the Robert's Rules of Order aspect of this, but can I rescind my motion?
Yeah, once it's seconded, it's an active motion, so the board can consider
Okay.
anything that you state during discussion, and you're
But you
free.
have to have a vote on it.
And you can vote however you want. Just because you made the motion doesn't impact or bind your hands in any regard. Any other discussion on the motion? Hearing none, Mr. Evans, I believe we're prepared for a vote.
Mr. Lambert,
No.
Mr. Sanzika,
No.
Mr. Clark,
Yes.
Mr. Desmond,
I'm sorry, for clarification, is this for
to deny.
denying? No.
Mr. Eisenbacher?
No.
Mr. Neal?
Yes.
Motion fails. Does anyone else have any comments, questions for staff, or a motion to deliver?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Lambert?
I hate to do this, but what I would suggest, or I'll make a motion that we postpone to the next meeting. That way we have a full board at that time to consider this, so that way we avoid any possibility of a tie vote, which would be another situation where we might be repeating ourselves in a year.
Motion has been made for postponing to the June agenda. Is there a second? Mr. Neal seconds. Under discussion, I would just like to make the comments to the petitioner that during this period of time, you have the right to speak to Mr. Evans and city staff about options, and they facilitate comments to the board. You clearly send a communication in written form to the city staff, and then that is included in our agenda, not just for our review, but for the general public as well. So that is an option to you. We're not saying that you have to do that, but that is available to you. Any other discussion on the motion?
Mr. Chair, if
Mr.
no one else has any other comments, I think petitioner needs to understand that if we were to take another vote, and that vote, as you said, were a tie or a denial, then he'd have to wait another year to come back. So I think at this point, postponing is probably in petitioner's best interest.
Right, exactly. And so obviously you have to factor that in, and if there's something that Mr. Evans could help work with you on to perhaps find a solution here, then you could avoid potentially having the request denied and then having to wait for that very long period of time. Mr. Sanzica?
If you could remind me, do you just need a simple majority to approve the motion?
Four.
Need four?
We need four here. Yes.
4 votes.
That's correct. So I don't see any other,
Eisenbach, do you have your hand up?
No,
Oh, I'm
just
sorry.
For, I do,
Mr. Vice Chairman Eisenbacher.
I would prefer to get the ordinance fixed so that a beautiful house is allowed to be built that doesn't interfere with its neighbors. When you're on a large property, taller houses usually fit better. And I know that the ordinance is scaled for the height for the zoning district, but it doesn't appear that it's quite scaled enough for the R1A zoning district. Is it possible to also include a recommendation? Do we speak to the Planning Commission through resolutions, or do we speak to them? How would we communicate with them formally?
Through resolution.
Through resolution? Okay. I'd like to follow it up with a resolution to request the Planning Commission look at that at their earliest convenience. But we can go through this vote first.
And you can address that under item 6
Okay.
after another very important action item tonight.
Yeah.
So,
A lot of people are waiting for this.
exactly. So, and then of course, we do have a liaison from the Planning Commission, Mr. Sanzica, both serves on the Planning Commission, but also on this board, and so he's really the person who can help deliver information between the two. But I do agree that a resolution would be the best method to communicate that information. So on the motion to postpone to June, Mr. Evans, I believe we're prepared for a vote.
Mr. Sanzica?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Desmond?
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbacher?
Yes.
Mr. Neal?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
So we'll see this back again here before this board in June. So, gentlemen, we'll see you again in about 30 days. Thank you. Moving on to item 4C, related to Jason Souza, 4354 Cherrywood. Mr. Evans, could you please present to the board on this matter?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As printed in the agenda, this is a variance request for Jason Sousa at 4354 Cherrywood in order to construct, in addition to the house, number one, a 3-foot variance from the required 10-foot minimum side yard setback, and 2, a 5-foot variance from the requirement that both side yard setbacks combined be at least 25 feet I'd like to direct everybody's attention to the monitors. The subject property on Cherrywood is in a neighborhood located north of Waddles and west of Coolidge Highway. Specifically, it's on the east side of Cherrywood, right in the middle of the overhead. This is the sketch plan that the applicant has submitted. At the bottom of the sketch plan, he's proposing an addition here, and he's shown it in blue, to the south side of the house. He's proposing that addition to be 7 feet away from the south property line. I want to bring to everybody's attention that since the application was submitted, they performed some measurements on the property and indicated that the setback from the north property line is 17.5 feet. So one of these variances is actually going to be for less than what it was proposed for, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. These are some renderings of the proposed addition to the house. That's a floor plan. So back to our variance request. The first request is a 3-foot variance from the required 10-foot minimum side yard setback. That's along the south side where he's proposing to be 7 feet away. He needs to be 10 feet away. Now the combined setbacks with the revised measurement are actually 24.5 feet. So he now needs a 1/2 foot variance to that section of the code. So I'll turn it back over to the board for any questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Evans? Hearing none, then we'll...
One quick one.
Yes, Mr.
You
Simpson.
said it was need a 1.5 foot variance?
1/2 foot,
A 1/2 foot, okay.
Yeah.
6 inches.
6 inches.
All right, I'm sorry, thank you.
At this point in time, I'd like to call the petitioner forward, or petitioners. Please identify yourself and state your relationship to the property.
Jason Sousa, I'm the property owner.
Oh, Brianna Ryan Sousa, also property owner.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Would you like to present to the board your request for a variance?
I think you have everything in front of you and wrote a very detailed letter to you guys, so hopefully you understand what our request is. Attached garage and breezeway. Breezeway's fairly necessary based on the fact that the house is only 1.5 stories, not a 2-story house. So attaching the garage directly to the side of the house would impede egress to one of our bedroom windows. So that's why we've fashioned the kind of a narrow breezeway there between the two homes. If you guys have any questions?
Thank you very much.
Happy to field them.
Any questions for the petitioners? Mr. Lambert?
So it's the breezeway itself that's causing the issue with the variance, is that correct?
Yes. We are not allowed to, per ordinance, we're not allowed to place the, a garage, a detached garage in that location, because it wouldn't be behind the house. So to attach it to the house, we needed to do that some way, but because it's not a 2-story home, it has that window, it starts at like 9 feet. So to be able to have egress out of that bedroom window, we have to create a downsloping roof and space between that and the roof of the garage.
Thank you.
Any other questions to the petitioner? Okay, if you could have a seat, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Evans, I do have a question. So just to Mr. Lambert's question, so how is this breezeway impacting it? Is it changing the, how does that change the factor that this is being incorporated into the house and that it has a larger footprint, or am I not understanding this correctly? Related to the variance request.
So your question is the breezeway considered,
Yeah, how is that impacting the,
well, the breezeway's not there yet.
I understand,
Yeah, I'm not sure what your question is.
but it would be there, so therefore, so it has nothing to do with the variance request? The breezeway?
I don't think the city's saying that the breezeway has anything to do with it. All we're looking at is the setbacks. it may be the construction code, and maybe the applicant might be able to shed some more light on some discussion they might have had with the building department or their builder or their architect.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? Or would someone like to be recognized? Mr. Lambert.
Mr. Evans, can you put that one slide back up again that showed the actual variances that we're looking at here? I think you said there's a total of a half an inch overall, and then there's a 3-foot variance they need?
Yeah, the first variance they need is 3 feet from the south property line, because they're only 7 feet and they need to be 10. And then when you add up the proposed setbacks, well, existing and proposed for both side property lines, they're supposed to total 25 feet, and they total 24 and a half feet.
6 inches. Okay.
Right.
Okay, Mr. Neal.
Question for staff, just to make sure I got the math right, is if they didn't have a breezeway and they put the garage right up against the house, dealt with the bedroom window that they mentioned, this all goes away, essentially.
The setback
Or
issue.
we got a
would-
6-inch
Yeah, because,
issue, right?
right, well, there, yeah, and just to clarify, the breezeway is proposed to be 5 feet wide.
Yeah.
So if that breezeway were gone and so what you're saying is bring this over, and then we have, instead of 7 feet, we have 12 feet, both would go away, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So even just a reduction, a half-foot reduction in the width of that breezeway would make this compliant?
One of them,
One of them.
we still have to be 10 feet from the south property line, and right now we're 7 feet.
Okay,
But that would satisfy the combined 25 feet for both.
okay.
Congratulations, gentlemen, for getting the questions out that I wanted to ask Mr. Evans, which I was unable to
We're happy to help you, Mr. Chairman.
intellectually communicate that. So are there any other questions of the petitioners? I mean, excuse me, of the staff? If not, we will have our public hearing, and then Mr. Eisenbacher is going to address as far as on the communication side of things. So at this point in time, I'd like to open the public hearing. If someone would like to address the board, please come forward. Please identify yourself and your relationship to the property, if any.
Excellent. Good evening, gentlemen. My name's Christopher Ryan. I'm the brother-in-law of Jason Sousa and Brianna Ryan. I currently reside in the residence. There's one point of clarification that I would like to make. If we did do away, as was proposed, of the breezeway, we would then be in front of you again proposing a variance to not have a breezeway attachment garage. We wouldn't be able to build a garage without a breezeway. So it would just be replacing one variance with another variance, because there's a separate variance that you can't have a separate non-unattached garage in that location. So it would be a Band-Aid fixing a Band-Aid, right? We'd be right back here proposing something different.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Neal.
Just one question, sir, is if the design was configured, or what is the issue about having the garage directly touching the home? I may have misunderstood the petitioner, but there's an issue.
Sure.
What is it?
If you go to the other drawing where there's the blow-up of the stairs on the side of the house, this is a tri-level home. So right here, you can actually see there's actually a cutout next to the house where there's steps that go into that lower level from the outside of the house. So there would be no way of really putting the garage directly up against that without, I guess, blocking that whole access to that that half a flight of stairs that goes down into the lower level. And then you'd be blocking egress from the lower level of the house.
That's an exterior stairs?
That is correct.
But you can get to the house, that part of the house from inside. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And I think there's actually some pictures, some actual photos that show.
So if I could ask you a question,
Sure.
I mean, maybe the question on a lot of people's minds is that in order to have the addition, it sounds like you may have to give up something to gain something in order to avoid the variance requirement or to make it fit, if you will. Is that something, do you know if yourself, what's being related as a family member, or the petitioner has considered?
I would allow them to speak on that matter. I don't
Understood.
feel comfortable speaking for them.
Thank you.
No, ma'am, you have to come to the podium if you want to address, but this is his portion, so.
I just wanted to clarify that by eliminating the breezeway, that we'd just be creating another variance. It wouldn't be a
I
solution.
understand.
And that's all that I wanted to bring forward.
I appreciate that.
Yep.
I appreciate
So
it.
I have a quick
Yes, yes, sir.
question for you. So you say you currently reside at the residence?
That is correct.
So is the expansion to accommodate several families?
No, not at all.
I mean, what's the status of your living condition there? Are you temporarily there?
I am very temporary
Okay.
there. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else like to address the board on this matter? Please come forward and identify yourself.
So I think the question that you were asking was what we would have to give up, and essentially, to meet the requirements, we would have to have a 17-foot wide garage. It's a requirement to put any type of addition in that location to the house, it has to be attached to the house. To attach anything to the house and still maintain our bedroom window egress, we have to go below their window, which is 9 feet. The bottom of that window is 9 feet. So if I had any type of roof line or structure that, a garage that was going up from there, I would not be able to get out that window, right? That's for fire reasons and various things. I have to be able to get out that window. Otherwise, I'd be completely just not having a bedroom up there and losing a bedroom. Yes, to meet the requirement, I could go down to a 17-foot garage, which is much smaller than the smallest standard size garage, two-car garage, which is what we currently have, a two-car garage.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr.
question for the
Neal.
petitioner. Ma'am, has the building department or fire department indicated the need or the requirement for you to have that window for egress?
A bedroom must have a window. To be considered a bedroom, it has to have a window. You have to have egress.
Okay.
Mr. Lambert?
Looking at the overhead photo, I see there's a tree right behind your home there, and essentially where the garage would be built. Would that tree have to come out or not?
There is a tree that is currently at the top of our driveway that would need to be removed, yes.
All right. Thank you.
It's unfortunate.
Okay, thank you. Would any other member of the public like to address the board on this matter? Not, we're going to close the public comment and then ask Vice Chairman Eisenbacher to address the board as to written communications of any sort.
I couldn't see any on the table or in the agenda.
Thank you. So we bring it back to the board table for consideration. Is there any member that would like to be heard on this matter?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Neal?
I didn't see the back of the home, but I'm just curious if we can put a window somewhere else and make this work. I don't know the answer to that, but that's the question I would put out for the board. If other people saw more of the home than I did, I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. You want to address that to Mr. Evans?
Mr. Evans, is there any input you can give us there?
I don't know the interior layout of the house.
Okay.
Would you like to recall the petitioner to,
If I could, yeah, might as well ask that question.
one or both of the petitioners could come back to the podium, please? Thank you.
Thanks for coming back up, ma'am. I was just wondering on the window issue, is
Did
it
you have
possible to move the
picture
window?
of the side of the house? No, the photograph.
One more.
Right there. Okay, so the window that's in question is the window right above the stairway there? Okay? And,
Oh, it doesn't go to the back of the house, that bedroom?
no,
Okay, all right.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Would a member of the board like to be recognized? Vice Chairman Eisenbacher.
I would like to move the resolution for approval with the updated dimensions. Looking at page 2 at our statement of difficulty, the exceptional characteristic for the property is the shape combined with the placement of the house. For B, the variance is for this location, not for some other location. C, it is not of a personal nature. D, it was not created by this owner or the previous owners. And E, we have no complaints, and this is not, looking at the elevations of, or the overhead view of the houses in the neighborhood and looking at the neighborhood, it is not creating, not going to block light, air, will not increase the congestion on the street or increase the danger of fire or endanger public safety, or diminish or impair the established property value within the surrounding area, or any of the other items listed in item E.
I second.
Thank you.
Motion's been seconded by Mr. Desmond. We have a discussion period now on the motion. Is there a member who would like to comment before we take a vote? Hearing none, Mr. Evans, I believe we're prepared for a vote.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Desmond?
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbacher?
Yes.
Mr. Neal?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Mr. Sanzika?
Yes.
Motion passes. Congratulations. You have your variance. Item number 5, communications. Mr. Evans, do you have anything for us?
No, I don't.
Okay, we move right on to item number 6, which the first item that we'll discuss is the election of officers. As you know, we have 2. We have a chairman and we have a vice chairman. And any member can create a motion, state a motion for both or one, and then we would then consider the other separately. Mr. Lambert.
Mr. Chairman, assuming our parliamentarian thinks that this motion's in order, I would move that we re-elect Glenn Clark as chairman and David Eisenbacher as vice chairman.
Is there a second to that motion? Mr. Sanzika seconds. Is there any discussion? Hearing none? All those in, well, I guess we have to have a roll call vote. It was a little bit, threw me off that we had all these people for the other agenda item, but very few comments during public hearings, so sorry about that. It kind of threw me off a little bit there. Mr. Evans, I believe we're prepared to vote.
Mr. Desmond?
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbacher?
Yes.
Mr. Neal?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Mr. Sanzika? Mr. Clark?
Yes. Congratulations, Vice Chairman Eisenbacher.
Congratulations, Chairman.
Just a question to Ms. Dufresne. Since there wasn't any other motion heard, but I didn't ask for any other motions, is that okay? Okay. Very good. So now I'd like to open up item 6 for any other miscellaneous business. Vice Chairman Eisenbacher, I believe, has something. Yes.
Yes, I was just trying to go through the zoning ordinance very rapidly to find the section that defines 30 feet, and the word height is used quite a bit in this ordinance, and I haven't found it. But I would like to craft an intelligent resolution motion to communicate through our representative that we would like the Planning Commission to consider an amendment to the zoning ordinance for the sake of building height, residential property building height on large residential properties that is not an impact on the neighbors. So we're also competitive with surrounding neighborhoods and architectural standards for large homes, or architectural norms for large homes.
Surrounding communities, you mean,
Surrounding communities and places.
and stuff.
Is that something that gets seconded, or is
Yes,
that
is there
just?
a second?
Okay, then yeah, I second that.
Desmond, second. Do we have any discussion at this point in time?
I see that happening consistently more and more. Royal Oak, I know they just had one that went up that was seated, I think it was 34 feet, and that was one of the first that was on Gardenia. I've been seeing it more and more happen, so I mean, it's not, it is conforming with modern, what the market is doing and what the builders are doing and other cities are responding to. So.
I'm sure the residents are getting taller and taller as time goes by.
That wouldn't be my problem. I keep shrinking. I don't know.
I think you're correct, actually.
We've got the right representative.
Yeah, you.
And I would say, I think there was a comment, it may have been Vice Chairman Eisenbacher, about how different neighborhoods would be impacted. And like in my neighborhood, clearly this would be not welcome. But in that corner of Troy, and which I know quite well, it would, you know, it seems to fit. So having said all that, I think that that's something that the Planning Commission and Council should address. Does the resolution address both bodies? Mr. Eisenbacher?
Yes,
Okay,
please.
very good. Any other discussion on that motion? Mr. Neal?
Yeah, I'm not sure, I guess I would add this to the discussion, is that sometimes unique characteristics of an area, especially with the larger parcels, maybe the best way forward is if the Planning Commission would consider a different metric, different measuring, if possible. I'm not a architect and I'm not a planner. Maybe that's just set in stone. That's how you measure it, and we wouldn't change from it. But the problem here is how we measure, and there's no variability in the code. And you know, hopefully, if it doesn't become part of the resolution per se, it's fine. But if the Planning Commission does review these meeting minutes, is that it would seem to me that the better way of maybe addressing an issue like this is to have more latitude as to how they measure, how they calculate for a given region.
Mr. Senzik?
I concur. I think what the issue is that there's no really any opportunity to review these adjacent properties or look or review or consider the topography. See if there's shadows, how the home would affect the adjacent residents. So there possibly could be other considerations to the height, and I don't know if that's a planning issue or a zoning, you know, where that would be considered. But I would hope that we could give some latitude to our administration to review these, to take other issues like that into consideration.
Great. Anyone else? Mr. Evans, I believe we're prepared for a vote.
Mr. Desmond?
Yes.
Mr. Eisenbacher?
Yes.
Mr. Neal?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Mr. Sanzika?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes. So that will be communicated to Planning and Council. Excellent. Just the other question I have, Mr. Evans, is any word by council on an appointment to this board to fill out the 7th Courtney seat?
No, council's not taking any action. I'm not aware if they have any interested applicants.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Lambert?
I believe at the last city council meeting, they elevated Mr. McCowan to Ken's old seat.
Or did they?
I think last week, so, but you might check to make sure.
I should probably check. I should probably be someone to know that.
If he's taken his oath, this could be a absence versus
Yeah.
inability to serve tonight. Well, if that's the case, congratulations to him. I didn't see the last council or read about it, so, Mr. Neal.
A question, Mr. Chairman, just on that policy. Is it policy that we would look to elevate an alternate first before appointing someone else? To me, that seems
I don't believe that's,
proper, because they've been more trained, aware of the policies, procedures. They may have the interest in serving an alternate. I'm only mentioning, it would be great if Mr. McCowan is the replacement. But my only thought is that if I was in a situation and you kind of get bypassed just because you're, quote, a alternate.
we have 2 alternates.
Well, that's another issue, but
And I believe Mr. Calhoun had been an alternate longer than.
Oh, okay, well,
Maybe he wasn't interested, I don't know.
well, that's an issue for council to decide who's a better
Yeah.
fit.
Mr. Robbins?
And if I could, it is something that council members forward. Yeah. Someone has to take action to get the name.
Right.
I mean, there's an interested pool, but someone has to take action to do that. And so I would think that somebody would check with one of our alternates. I believe they probably did check with Mr. McCowan to see if he would be interested in doing that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So moving on, any other miscellaneous business? Mr. Sanzica?
I would just ask Mr. Evans if he could remind Mr. Savina and Planning Director that there were other suggested variances to be considered that I don't believe have been acted on, and that now might be a good time to address all those issues at one time.
Yes, and we are keeping a laundry list of all the items, not just the zoning board, but any other items that we run into through the administration. So I'll remind him.
Thank you.
Any other business on item 6? Seeing none, we move on to public comment. If you'd like to address the board on any business, please step to the podium. Seeing that there isn't anybody else besides us in this chamber, we'll close that portion out. So we will be seeing each other again here in June. And thank you, everybody, for another good meeting. So thank you, and we'll see you soon. We are adjourned.